Mesdames et Messieurs les
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I call to order the second meeting of the informal hearings with representatives of major groups and other stakeholders to exchange views on the zero draft of the outcome document of the United Nations Conference on Housing, Sustainable Urban Development, Habitat III, pursuant to General Assembly Resolution 70/2010, or rather 210 of 22 December 2015. This afternoon, we will have two panel discussions. The first panel is entitled Vision, Quito Declaration. The second panel, which will begin at 4:30, is entitled Transformative Commitments for Sustainable Urban Development. During both panels, we will hear presentations by our distinguished panelists, which will be followed by an exchange of views. Our first panel will begin now. Again, that panel is on Vision, Quito Declaration. I would like to start by extending a warm welcome for the moderator of this panel, Mr. Christopher Decchi of Pax Romana, United States. I'm also very pleased to welcome to this panel our distinguished panelists, Mr. Sunil Dubey of Metropolis, Australia, Ms. Betsy Campbell of the European Foundation Center, US, Mr. Bachir HABITAT, the Executive Director of ENDA ECOPOP, Senegal, Madame Daniela Carrère-Marquis from the Inter-American Development Bank, and Mr. Victor Pineda of the World Enabled United States. Without further ado, I will hand over to the moderator, Mr. Decchi. Following the first round table or panel, we'll go to the second one immediately. Thank you. Mr. Decchi, you have the floor.
Inputs. Thank you. So the next speaker is Bachir HABITAT. He's the Executive Director of ENDA ECOPOP, and he will be speaking in French. So just so you know, if you need translation, he'll be speaking in French. Thank you, Bachir.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I'd like to thank those who convened this meeting. It's so key for Habitat III. I'm Bachir HABITAT. I am taking the floor on behalf of ENDA ECOPOP. It's a representative of civil society in Africa and Senegal specifically. Sir, I also represent the Observatory for Democracy, the regional one for Dakar. Covers 28 of 54 African countries and covering more than 350 African cities. I'd like to extend a heartfelt thank you to those who gave us the zero draft. I think that the key questions that arose during Vancouver up until now have all been taken into account, and that's crucial to underscore. Many actions on the ground and programs in urban development seek to strike a balance between all issues of eradicating poverty and managing it, providing services for people, as well as the extent to which they're in line with governance. The better governance is, the better combating poverty is. That means that it's important that the zero draft, at least in the preambular section, took this into account. That's quite important. Now, a few comments on the document and specifically the statement made in paragraph 2, where I see that there's a good definition here of what will be happening in Quito and the statement there, and then with respect to the 2030 agenda. But I think there's a need to calibrate it with another agenda, one in Africa, it's true I'm going to talk about Africa because that's where I come from. That's what I have in mind. So there's another agenda gaining ground there and being adopted by the African Union called Agenda 2063. That's for the next 50 years. So I think that there needs to be a calibration or harmonization with these agendas to ensure that cities take into account challenges. Now, my second comment. I'd like to welcome what I saw, and I'll call the rights of cities, and that's in paragraph 4, quite clearly stated. And I'd like to welcome that as well. I'm very pleased with the para on the participatory approach of management or governance of cities. When we look at urban issues, it's not just a responsibility of states nor of local authorities. It is first and foremost the participation of peoples in formulating development agendas, and I'm talking about defining them, but also implementing them. So this is about participation, and I'm very happy to see that included in the document. I'd like to thank the drafters for that. Urban issues have been integrated. That's important too, because I think an important challenge today alongside climate change is also urban security. It can't just be addressed by local authorities, it has to be addressed by all stakeholders. On the other hand, this may be something lacking in the document. I'd like to come back to the matter of providing cities with technical, human, and financial resources. If we take a look and compare the situation in Africa, where there's a handover public budgets from the state to local authorities, 3.5% with respect to, in comparison with Latin American countries, you're looking at 25%, and if we talk about others, we could even be talking about 45%. So you see 3.5%, that's just not enough. Now, there is a debate underway, and governments have made proposals saying that the transfer level should get to at least 15%. And that will allow cities to have necessary resources that let them address or rise to the expectations of their citizens. And I think that's important that be stressed, emphasized, and integrated in this document. I'd also like to highlight what I might call the legal or standards aspects, in particular when we talk about participatory governance. We see in many African countries a lot of laws are slow in coming with respect to the idea of a participatory democracy. These laws are slow in coming, as I said. While things move forward on the one hand, they need to move forward in other places. For an example, Tunisia, they've adopted a law which recognizes the role and participation of peoples in public policy. How about Senegal, for an example? Well, here laws date from far back, but we do have a formal law which recognizes the place and role that citizens should play in public policy and calibrates that with an actual absence of decrees that allow for implementation. This turns laws into realities. So that's something I wanted to highlight, and I'm saying that when we don't have those type of laws, maybe that's a role we could be playing as civil society. How can we assist in mainstreaming and ensuring that cities adopt, collectives adopt these, what I would call charters for the rights of cities? That would allow local authorities and states to rise to the expectations of citizens, but then again, keeping that in step with the civic duties, in particular as pertains to paying taxes. And then now I see your pencil going up, so I'm just finishing. But two key points. The need for capacity building, but in particular to support governments to tackle multifaceted challenges. I mean security. financing, climate change, and then finally draw upon all opportunities available as governments to address the situations at hand. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bachir. It's great that we're really taking note of the fact that the draft as it is now does talk about the need to include people, to include civil society, to include stakeholders in policy making and implementation at all levels. And it's really good that you were able to focus on that issue, as well as the issue of having regional development frameworks included in this discussion, like Agenda 2063. And of course, mentioning specifically technology and capacity building as critical means of implementation for this and other frameworks, whether it's the SDGs or others. So thank you very much for your statement.